Hello all, this is Piyush. If you have been really thinking of giving UPSC Civil Services examination in 2025 or 26, in that case, the next few minutes are going to be very important for you. As you all know that optional does play a very important role in your selection. And why this optional does play a very important role? Because there is a wider range of marks in optional. And that range can be noticed between 200 to 300. At one hand, you can find some people, they are not even able to cross 200. On the other hand, you can find some people, they are managing to cross even 300. और एक बात तो तय है, और आप जितना 300 के मार्क्स के आसपास पहुंचते हैं, ना केवल आप अपनी सिलेक्शन सिक्योर करते हैं, बल्कि आप अपनी अच्छी रैंक भी सिक्योर करते हैं. Because I believe that if you're close to 300, in that case, there are high chances that you're falling within 100. And of course, if you're falling within 100, your UPSC journey ends over there. So here I'm going to discuss about precisely one optional paper, that is history. Now the next question is the history as an optional paper. अब ये सवाल 7 करोड़ का है. Unfortunately, there is much negative perception for this optional paper in market. And there are certain very popular sayings for it, such as it's very less scoring, marks nahi aate hai, it's very lengthy, vast paper hai, you won't be able to finish the syllabus within 6 months, or even it is going to consume more time. But what I see that if there are some people, they manage to cross 300, in that case, if you are not able to manage like more than 300 marks in history optional, in that case, I believe that the problem lies in you. Maybe your strategy is wrong. Maybe the content that you have been referring, there is some problem with that. Because if some people are able to score more than 300, so why can't you? At the same time, there is one more thing, that if you have been covering the syllabus of history optional, scientifically, in that case, you can cover it within 6 months. So now the question is that whether you should take history as an optional paper or not. I'm not going to give this kind of justification to you that it is quite helpful in various GS papers, like such as paper 1, then ethics, and even in essay paper, it's going to help you out. Like, I'm trying to discuss something which is very logical. The point is this, that whether you have this optional paper or not, like this is pretty sure that you need to cover all the aspects of history. You need to cover ancient India, medieval India, modern India, post-independence, world history, and even art and culture. Because UPSC has started asking questions in both pre and mains examination from all these areas. So the next question is that who should consider history as an optional paper? And I believe that there are two types of students. They must think of history as their optional paper. The first, if you have studied history in your graduation, in that case, you should definitely consider it, because instead of investing much time in a new subject, it's always good for you to take history as an optional paper. And the second, those who have genuine interest in history and the historical discourses, I think they should also consider history as an optional paper. But make sure that this should not be the history which is basically being taught to you in the social medias. But that is just the interesting sort of history, which is definitely not the core part of history optional. So then we reach to the next question, that how to prepare this particular optional paper. There may be two ways of preparing this optional paper. One, through self-study, and the second, by joining any classes. But before making any decision, I think you must understand some of the basics of this discipline or the optional paper. Here I would like to remind you about some toppers such as Nausin, Shruti Sharma, Abhinav, Chandra Jyoti, and so on. क्या आपने वाकई सोचा है कि इनके बीच में क्या कॉमन है? एक तो ये कॉमन है कि इन सभी लोगों ने यूपीएससी सिविल सर्विसेज एग्जामिनेशन को पास किया, एंड दे आल्सो सिक्योर्ड वेरी गुड रैंक, and most of them have secured good rank in UPSC civil services examination because they managed to score very good in the optional paper. Most of them have either crossed 300 or they have reached very close to 300. But in sab ke alawa, there is one more thing which is common. They all have studied history in their graduation or masters. Is just a coincidence? I believe no. There is a reason behind it. So you just look at these questions. Last year के पेपर में ये सारे questions पूछे गए थे, and just try to figure out that out of the total questions, these are the questions which could not be answered from the popular books that you have been reading or any material or the notes which are available in market. Now just try to connect both the things. You all will be able to understand one thing, कि if you have really covered it extensively in that case, you'll be able to score very good. And that's why the people, those who have done their graduation or masters, they have managed to score very good in history optional. But one thing that you should keep in mind, that even though if you have studied this subject in your graduation, the approaches remain very different. When you study history as a discipline in universities, in that case, you mostly focus on the bigger dimensions, and at the same time, you give greater emphasis on historiography. On the other hand, when you prepare the history optional for UPSC, in that case, you need to focus even on the minor dimensions, and at the same time, historiography just remain one aspect of it. And apart from that, you need to even focus on the content and most importantly, the concepts. Why? Because the questions are never being repeated in the same fashion, rather a new dimension is being asked to you. So if your concepts are very clear, in that case, you'll be able to answer those questions. And those who haven't studied this particular subject in their graduation, they always need to keep in mind one thing, that since the questions are not being asked from one particular source, and that's how if you have been doing it by your own, in that case, you need to collect the information from the various sources. So the moral of the story, if you have ample amount of time, energy and resources, in that case, definitely you can prepare it by your own and you can go for the self-study. But if you believe that you cannot afford this much time, in that case, you need to take some specialized guidance. So what should be the expectation from any foundation course that you have been joining? First, it is focusing on conceptual clarity. Why conceptual clarity? Because as I told you, that it's not mandatory that the questions are being repeated in the same fashion or the same theme is being asked every time. As you can see that the questions are being twisted. So you might find that themes are similar, but then a new dimension is being asked. The second important thing, that it gets you the most relevant content. The content which is relevant these days, and it simultaneously avoids the unnecessary content, because when you read history specifically by your own, in that case there is so many things which are unnecessary and they are not being used anywhere. But if you do it by your own, in that case you are not able to figure it out that whether it is relevant or non-relevant. Third, it should include the recent historiography. You must have noticed one thing, कि earlier people from non-history background also, they have cleared this civil services examination with very good marks in history optional. But nowadays, as I discussed, that there is a pattern can be noticed, that only those who have studied history, they are able to manage very good marks in the subject. Why? Because unfortunately, the content what you have been referring is not giving you the most relevant content which is relevant in the present time. At the same time, it should also provide very frequent answer writing practices. Even the PYQs should be discussed extensively in the classes itself. And at the end, it is very important that you are getting a very crisp material which is helping you to revise the content again and again. Because if you have been revising the content again and again, in that case, the way you are producing your answers, like, that would be very good. So this is also one of the basic requirements of the subject. So by keeping in mind all these kind of things, we try to provide all these things our elite history optional foundation course. Okay, so as you can see this diagram, so we start with the basic concepts of history. That's very important. And I have emphasized on the concepts again and again. After that, like, we focus on the content. So if you have an enriched content, as I told you, which should be the relevant content. So in the initial period, like, we focus more on the concept and the content. Then we go to the next step, and there we, like, try to cover the map, which is normally being covered towards the end of the classes. And now onwards, we are going to introduce a new thing, and there we are going to have the digital maps. Okay. Now, what is digital map? That I'll cover in a separate video. Then we even cover art and culture. And after covering all these things, then we go for extensive test series, or let's say answer writing. As I told you, that answer writing does play a very important role. So that's why we desperately focus a lot on that. Moving further, once everything is done, then what do we do? Like, we go for a shorter course that's called as one page, one theme. So basically in 30-35 classes, we try to revise the whole syllabus, and then we prepare a sort of crisp and precise notes which should be repeated or revised again and again. And ultimately, this is the content which has to be produced in the answers. And simultaneously, we also covered the previous year questions. So we mainly focus on last 15 years questions, because if you have studied the last 15-year questions properly, in that case, I believe that you are gaining that confidence. Yes, if any question is coming, in that case, I'll be able to answer those questions. So that's how we just try to build the base initially and then further the superstructure. And that's how we try to prepare the subject in such a way that by the time of exam, you feel very confident. And if you are having this kind of confidence, so I believe that definitely you can score more than 300. So I'm looking forward to see you here. Thank you very much.